sure you guys all know that, but this is a similar thing. This particular process for replacing the heads and moving that assembly rather than moving discs and platters, this will take about 2.5 hours to actually do, even if you know what you're doing. It's a difficult task to get it done. And then one of the other options that you have, because it's, again, a mechanical device and there's pieces of it that break, is you can move that. You can physically move the PCB board and maybe get lucky and things work exactly the way they're supposed to. So USB flash repair, basically you're looking for the same kind of thing. You're like, I have this, I bet you guys all have this soldering gun. This is my favorite one. It's automatic, it's fast, I'm done in like 10 minutes. And I don't have to do anything. But again, you're looking at a similar type of problem and similar type of thing, is that you got to find another one that's identical to whatever's not broke on this particular one and move it. Now, it's a lot easier with the USB flash devices because not a lot changes in the control chip and in the structure or anything else. It's a fairly dumb device. So if you have one piece of memory on the device, you move it, you're probably going to be okay. You can do quite a bit with it. Obviously, if there's something else that's simpler to do, like there's a crack in the board and you can figure out how to repair it with a soldering gun or something, then you're in pretty good shape. You can probably do something and repair it before you go trying to unsolder a memory chip itself. But when you're dealing with SSD drives, you're going to start looking at some of the same stuff. You're going to start looking at, well, where's a problem area? Where's something that's wrong with this that I can try to replace? Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes it is a burnt spot on the board or an extremely hot spot or a crack or something you can actually see visually with your eye. But sometimes it's not. And when it's not, it gets dramatically harder. At that point in time, you're doing the exact same thing. You're going to destroy another good hard drive to actually make this SSD drive work. And I can tell you that is not an easy process. That is a very complicated, takes an extremely long amount of time, and your rate of success is fairly low. So I've been playing with them for about a year, trying to do the same kind of thing, destroyed a couple of grand worth of equipment and drives. And basically, if you don't have some really high-end specialized soldering equipment to get rid of the solder and remove the chips, you're going to destroy it in the process of doing this. So you can see dramatically how we've gone from just the possibility of doing a hard drive repair or doing something yourself to trying to repair an SSD drive or device. So again, if something bad happens to that thing, it may live longer, it may be a little bit more stable, it may be happier as you're moving your laptop around, but if it's gone, it's an extremely difficult task and it's not going to be cheap to actually do the repair. So, any questions? He said, other than interrupting the garbage collection routine, and I'm guessing for forensics purposes, obviously the point is you know, if the erase cycle's fast enough, it erases the data before we can actually get to it, kind of thing. So that last file that changed and got moved to a new location, you can't get that first file back. And I would say that that's a pretty good statement. That's a fair assessment. Obviously, if I knew that and I'm doing forensics, like one of the first things you do with forensics is you don't turn the hard drive on, you take it and image it and then you blah, 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 and you move on. And if eventually the whole scenario became the same way for flash disks, if somebody figures out how to read a flash disk, you may just rip the control chip off or something and put something else of your own there, so there is no, you know, garbage collection routine and nothing to go back and figure out and do something with. Again, I'm betting that as 10 years goes by, somebody's going to figure out a way to control that and have better ideas about what to do with that. But it's a fairly difficult and probably impossible task by today's standards right now. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Ziploc.
The expected lifespan, or the unknown lifespan of this, estimated lifespan, based on the various factors of an inactive section. Was that specifically toward the data stored in that section? Can you do future read writes after that time expires on the data as well? Or is the equipment...
it does not damage the cell. It's called write endurance. It doesn't damage the cell necessarily for that to happen. What happens is what he asked is, I think, that if you let the drive sit there for 10 years and you didn't do anything with it and the data died on it and it has now expelled, whether or not you can still continue to use the device. And I believe you can. I believe that it will still live through all the cycles. We obviously don't have a real true and try. We haven't had them long enough to really know. I mean, we barely had even rewritable CDs long enough to be able to answer that question completely. But my belief would be they would be perfectly fine, and that's what the reports I have read, that later on you could erase it and then you could read and write from it again. But the data that it read would be false. The only chance that something else bad happens is it tries to read the data, it gets an ECC error, it can't figure out that it's a good piece of data, and marks the block bad right away. So that's the other probability that it can happen. Yes, sir?
It seemed to me that you...
Well, one of you. That's fine.
I was going to ask, do you know how often the erase cycles, how frequent the erase cycles are, and does it vary from vendor to vendor?
I think it probably varies because it is code. In that particular case, it's vendor-specific code. And the tables that are read and the structure that is read is all done by the vendor. So I don't know what the cycle itself is. My belief is that it's fairly fast, but I've seen some older chips, like a 64 meg chip, where I erased it and did actual, because you got to understand too, now knowing this type of information, actually doing like a wipe on your drive is completely useless because it didn't do anything. It's not actually erasing the sector you thought you were erasing. It's erasing some new sector where it moved data to, and it's doing further damage to the disk while you're erasing it. But my assumption at this point in time is that, you know, that's...
Also, when a block is marked bad, does it get erased immediately as part of that being marked bad, or is the data that was there going to be there now forever?
One more time?
When a block is marked as bad.
Yes, block is marked as bad.
The data that was around that, you know, there are sectors around that part of it.
Is it erased? Is that what you're asking? If it gets put in the garbage collection routine and gets cleaned up? My bet is no. My bet it is not erased. My bet is that that's a vendor-specific thing. It puts it in a bad block, never looks at that bad block table again, and that's why there's a free list and a bad block list. And the free list is where we can actually look to do future things, and the bad block list is completely ignored in the future and removed from the table. And it's done at initialization time when the actual device is powered on. Yes, sir?
If the physical memory chip itself is damaged, is there any chance of recovering that data, or is that data pretty much...
If a physical memory chip is damaged, is there any chance? I personally cannot repair a chip that is physically damaged. There may be somebody somewhere who can. Maybe FBI is really happy about it. You know, who knows? But I have not been able to do it. There's nothing I can do if the chip itself has a crack or something in it. There's just no way. It's a grid, and the grid is way smaller than you can deal with, and it's a solid piece of silicon from that standpoint. So I doubt it. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Yeah, that's right.
Do you know if anyone has found a way, or if there are any manufacturers who provide alternative controller chips? So, for example,
yes, there are. And there are. And Intel and Micron are working heavily to make an open standard for this whole thing. And there actually is, version 2 was just recently published on the Open NAND Interface Flash Guide. And the whole point is that they want a whole slew of vendors to start using this particular scheme. The reality is, from other vendors that I've talked to, especially people like SanDisk and some other things, are that they're living in la-la land, and why should they be able to tell us what we're going to do? And so there's some differences in market perspective too. Like SanDisk owns 12% of the market or so. Samsung is the largest reseller right now of flash memory, all because they make all the iPod stuff. And so they probably own something in the neighborhood of 50% of the market as a whole. And so again, they're not going to live by the standard that Intel or somebody else set. But Intel, Micron both made, and their standard has timing and everything in it and tells you how long it's going to take for each thing. My understanding is that in some cases it's slower on certain functions, so they can have a general function that is the same for everybody. And they made a company together called IM Flash. And so anybody who sees that IM Flash starting to hit the shelves, that's the Intel Micron deal going together.
And just a quick follow-on question to that. The controller chips, are they able to be modified, or is it just raw silicon as soon as it's pressed?
The controller chip is now, I am not an electrical engineer. I'm not really a firmware guy or anything like that, but my bet is obviously you can make your own, you can control it. You can take the chips off, put them in your own device, and talk to them. And we have done that. I actually took some chips. We wrote things to them, erased things, and then if you guys saw John Mushhammer's talk here last year on the cameras where he actually took that off and it was just a dumb piece of memory, he was actually able to read that content and do something with it because it wasn't encoded. There was nothing special about it. So John worked with me on, I sent him some chips I had worked on and he took them off and made it